It's easy to think that your child will be just fine when they leave for university, that the lessons you've taught them will stick. But trust me, there are dangers in this world you can't even imagine. And no one tells you that sometimes the bigger danger is not what they encounter out there, but what they lose within themselves. It was supposed to be a simple day. My father, a hard-working man, had gone out early in the morning to harvest palm fruits from the tall trees near our home. He was strong, sturdy, and used to climbing tall trees. But that day was different. That day, I heard a scream that still haunts me. I rushed outside and found my father lying motionless on the ground. He had fallen from the tree and it was too late. He was gone. I didn't understand death back then. I was just a little girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old. But the moment I saw my father lying there, I knew that life would never be the same. My mother, who had always been so strong, broke down completely. It felt like our world had shattered in an instant. My father had been the pillar of our little family, and now he was gone. But my mother, despite the pain in her heart, didn't let it break her completely. She gathered herself, wiped her tears, and made a promise that day. She promised me that we would make it through together. From that moment, it was just me and her. My mother worked tirelessly, doing whatever it took to provide for us. She was my everything. She was both mother and father to me. She raised me with love and care, teaching me the values of kindness, respect, and humility. She often told me stories about how important it was to stay grounded, to remember where I came from, and to never let life's difficulties change who I was inside. As I grew older, I understood her better. I saw how hard she worked to give me an education, to make sure I had opportunities she never had. Even when things were tight, even when she was exhausted from the long days, she always made sure I knew that the most important thing in life was to be a good person. She would say, "Life will test you, Ebere, but you must never lose your values. No matter what, always stay kind and never forget the people who loved you." I held onto those words like they were my lifeline. But when the day finally came for me to leave for the university, I wasn't sure I understood the weight of those words. I was so eager to start a new life, to step out into the world on my own. I had dreams of making my mother proud, of becoming someone important, but I was about to learn that the world was far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. University was a world I had never known before, exciting, new, and full of promise. I remember stepping onto that campus for the first time, feeling like I had finally escaped the small world I had known. I wanted to be free, to fit in, to experience everything I had read about. I thought I was ready to take on the world. But what I didn't realize was that I was about to lose the one thing I had always held on to: myself. The excitement of being away from home, the freedom, the parties, and the new friends were intoxicating. I felt like I could finally be someone people admired. I quickly became friends with a group of girls who seemed to have everything figured out. They were confident, bold, and carefree. I wanted to be just like them, to be part of something bigger. But with each passing day, I found myself drifting further away from the person I used to be. I started neglecting my studies, partied until the early hours, staying out late, and ignoring the phone calls from my mother. She would call, worried about how I was doing, reminding me to keep my focus, but I wasn't listening. I was so caught up in this new life that I couldn't hear her voice, the voice that had always kept me grounded. As I began to settle deeper into university life, it didn't take long for the allure of the crowd I was hanging out with to become even stronger. The girls I had once admired for their confidence, their boldness, were no longer just classmates. They had become my new world, my new family. But what I didn't realize was that the cost of their acceptance wasn't just my time or my dignity, it was everything. The more time I spent with them, the more I changed. I was no longer the Ebere who used to sit with my mother and listen to her stories. I wasn't even the girl who had walked into this university with hopes and dreams. I was becoming someone else, someone driven by the need to belong, to feel powerful. Every day felt like I was sinking deeper into a place I couldn't escape. But at the same time, I couldn't stop myself. These girls, these so called big girls, were always at the center of the university's social scene. They had money, they had influence, and they lived the kind of life I had always dreamed of. But the deeper I went into their world, the more I started seeing the price of their lifestyle. There was nothing free about it, everything had a price. And the more I tried to prove myself to them, the more I was tested. I remember the first time they took me to one of their parties. It was nothing like the small gatherings I had gone to before. This was a world of wealth, glamour, and secrets. There were influential people everywhere, businessmen, politicians, and the university's top students, all mingling and flaunting their power. I felt out of place, but also a part of me craved it. I wanted to be seen, I wanted to be important, and that's when it happened. One of the girls, Ada, who had become my closest friend, pulled me aside at the party. She smiled at me, but her eyes were calculating. Listen, Ebere, she said, her voice low. You are almost there. You just need to prove you can handle bigger things now. If you really want to be one of the top girls, you have to step up. I didn't understand at first. What more could I do? What more did they want from me? But Ada wasn't done. She leaned in closer, her breath smelling of expensive perfume and alcohol. Tonight, the politicians are here. You see those men? They can make or break careers. They can give us the world. And if you want to roll with the big girls, you need to know how to play the game. My heart dropped. I thought I knew what she meant, but I didn't want to believe it. I had already done things I regretted, but this was a line I never thought I would cross. But Ada wasn't finished. You need to sleep with one of them, Ebere, she said, her eyes searching my face for a reaction. You do that, and you'll be one of us. You'll get everything you've ever wanted: power, money, respect. I couldn't breathe. I felt sick to my stomach. This wasn't what I had signed up for. This wasn't why I came to the university. I had come here to learn, to build a future. I never thought I would be standing in front of a girl who was asking me to trade my body for acceptance and influence. But there it was, a simple, cruel offer. Sleep with a politician and you'll be in the cycle. You'll be one of the big girls. The thought of it repulsed me, but at the same time, the allure of power, of fitting in, clouded my judgment. This was the price of acceptance. I knew it, and somewhere deep down, I realized I had already come too far to turn back. Ada's smile widened as she watched me struggle. Think about it, Ebere. You want to be part of the elite, right? You want to have what they have. This is how it's done. This is how we make it. It's just business. I stood there, frozen, torn between the girl I once was and the girl I had become. The girl who once listened to her mother's words, who believed in hard work and integrity, seemed so distant now. I was no longer sure if I could go back to that world, the one where I was loved and respected for who I was. I had become someone else. The pressure was unbearable. I went home that night, lying in bed, tossing and turning, my mind racing with thoughts of what Ada had said. The next morning, I woke up with the same thoughts nagging at me. What if I say no? But deep down, I knew what the answer was. I had already lost too much to walk away now. If I turned down this opportunity, I would lose everything: the friendships, the power, the respect I had fought so hard to gain, and worse, I would be one of the left behind. The world of power and influence would move on without me. I didn't want to be left behind. I didn't want to be just another girl from the village, forgotten and insignificant. So I made my decision. I swallowed the sick feeling in my stomach and I walked into that room, into the lion's den, where men with power would soon expect my submission in exchange for a love I thought I wanted. But as I stood there, preparing to make my choice that would define the rest of my life, I felt something stir deep inside of me. A faint voice, a whisper, really told me to stop, to turn away, to think of my mother. But I had come so far. I had lost myself, and I didn't know how to find my way back. It felt like I was walking into a nightmare, but somehow I couldn't stop myself. I had already made the decision. Though every part of me was screaming to turn back, my body moved forward, but my heart was heavy, weighed down by the guilt and shame of what I was about to do. I had convinced myself that this was the price I had to pay to belong. This was the cost of being part of the cycle, the group of powerful, influential women I had come to admire. I had seen how they carried themselves, confident and untouchable. They walked through life like queens, like they owned everything, and I wanted that. I wanted to feel that power, that respect. It was a hunger I couldn't ignore. I needed it, even if it meant sacrificing the last shred of my dignity I had left. Ada had arranged everything. She had set up the meeting with the politician, an older, well known man with a reputation for using his wealth and influence to get whatever he wanted. He was one of those untouchable figures on campus, the kind of man who could make or break a career with a single phone call. I had heard whispers about him before. People said he was dangerous, that he had a dark side, but all I could think about was the power he could offer me. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be recognized. I wanted to feel like I finally mattered. The night of the meeting, I dressed carefully, knowing that I had to look the part. I wore a tight red dress, the kind that made heads turn, hoping it would make me feel powerful. But as I stood in front of the mirror, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. She looked like a stranger, someone who had completely lost herself to the allure of a life that would destroy her. But it was too late to turn back. I had made my decision. When I arrived at the politician's hotel room, my hands trembled as I knocked on the door. I knew exactly what was waiting for me on the other side. What I didn't know was how quickly everything would spiral out of control. The door swung open, and there he was. His smile was warm, almost too warm, but his eyes were cold and calculating. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He grabbed my wrist and pulled me inside the room, locking the door behind me. The dim light from the lamp flickered, casting long shadows on the wall. There was a moment of silence as I stood there, heart pounding in my chest, wondering if I could still find a way to back out. But as I looked at him, my thoughts began to cloud. I knew this was my moment to prove myself. I knew that once I walked out of this room, there would be no going back. Don't be nervous, he said, his voice low and soothing, almost too smooth. This is how it's done, Ebere. You will get used to it. Just relax. But the words sounded hollow. His touch, his grip felt wrong. I tried to pull away, but his hands were stronger than I expected. Please, I changed my mind, I stammered, my voice trembling with fear. But the moment I said those words, the smile on his face faded. His eyes turned dark. You don't get to change your mind, he growled, his grip tightening on my arm. You've already agreed. You will do as I say. The room seemed to close in around me. Panic set in, but my body froze. I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, to run, but I felt trapped. His hands were everywhere, and before I could even understand what was happening, he pushed me onto the bed. My head was spinning. I had come here with one intention, to prove myself, but this wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't something I had ever imagined. Before I could fight back, he forced himself on me. His weight crushed me, his hands pressing against my body, and I could do nothing but cry. I wanted to scream, to punch, to kick, but everything in me felt paralyzed. It was as if my body betrayed me, as if I wasn't even in control anymore. The man above me was not the powerful figure I had seen in the halls of the university. He was a monster. And in that moment, I realized just how far I had fallen. I was no longer the girl with dreams of success and respect. I had become a pawn in someone else's sick game. When it was finally over, I lay there, numb and broken. The pain was unbearable. But worse than the physical pain was the realization that I had just lost everything I had ever stood for. I had become a victim, not just of this man, but of my own choices. I had sold myself, my soul, just to be accepted by people who didn't care about me. The promise of power, of being one of the big girls, had led me here. and I felt more alone than I ever had in my entire life. The worst, however, was still to come. As I tried to gather myself, tears streaming down my face, the politician smiled at me. "You're very special, Ebere," he said, as though this were all just a transaction. "You will go far, but remember this: nothing in this world comes without a price." Days passed, but the unease in my body never left. At first, I thought it was just the physical and emotional toll of what happened. I told myself it was normal to feel this way after such a traumatic experience. But as time went on, the sickness deepened. My body felt weak and drained, and I couldn't shake the constant nausea and twisted feeling in my stomach. The fever came and went, but the chills never seemed to stop. I began to feel the weight of my choices pressing down on me, not just emotionally, but physically. At first, I tried to ignore it. I didn't want to face the truth of what I had done. I didn't want to confront the reality that the man who had used me, who had stolen the last bit of my dignity, had left me with something much worse than just a broken heart. But the signs were becoming too hard to ignore. My once vibrant, healthy skin began to pale, and I felt like I was losing myself all over again. It wasn't until I started to experience the deep, constant fatigue, like I had been drained of all my energy, that I finally broke down. I couldn't hide it anymore. I had to know what was happening to me. I went to the clinic, shaking with fear, praying that I was wrong, that it was something else. The nurse ran the test, and when she came back with the results, her face told me everything I needed to know. I was HIV positive. The words hit me like a freight train, and in that moment, the world around me seemed to stop. My hands were numb, and I could barely breathe. My mind raced. How? How could this happen? It felt like a punishment for everything I had done. Like this was the price I had to pay for my choices. The rape, the manipulation, the lies. It had all led me here. I had traded my soul for the illusion of power, and now I was paying the ultimate price. I didn't know how I made it home that day. I don't even remember my journey. All I could hear in my head was the noise's voice, the cold reality of what I was carrying now, and the deep shame that burned in my chest. When I walked back into the apartment, I found the girls waiting for me. Ada, the one who had introduced me to this world, was sitting on the couch with a glass of wine, laughing at something one of the other girls had said. But when they saw my face, the laughter died. I didn't need to say anything. They could see it in my eyes. "What's wrong, Ebere?" Ada asked, standing up. Her voice was more serious now, the playful tone gone. I couldn't speak at first. The words were stuck in my throat. The weight of my diagnosis pressing down on me. I opened my mouth, but all I could do was collapse into a chair, tears streaming down my face. I am positive, I whispered, my voice barely audible, the pain thick in my chest. The room went dead silent. No one moved, no one spoke. It was as if time had frozen. Then slowly, Ada dropped the glass she had been holding, her eyes wide with shock. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. I I have HIV, I said again, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. The politician, he didn't tell me. He's been living with it, and now I have it too. For a moment, no one said anything. The girls just stared at me, their faces a mixture of disbelief and horror. I could feel their eyes on me, but all I could do was cry. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. I wanted to disappear. Finally, it was Ada who spoke, but her words were not what I expected. "We didn't know," she whispered, her voice shaking. "We had no idea. None of us knew he had HIV." Her face was pale, and all I could see was the guilt in her eyes. But it wasn't the kind of guilt that came from remorse. It was more like a regret, a regret for pushing me into this world of manipulation and deceit. I didn't know. We thought he was clean. We didn't know. The others murmured in agreement, their face full of shame and confusion, but I couldn't find any comfort in their words. The damage had already been done on me. The moment the politician had forced himself on me, my life had changed forever. No apology, no excuse could ever take that away. Why didn't you warn me? I managed to choke out within sobs. Why didn't you tell me what I was walking into? Ada looked down, unable to meet my gaze. We thought you were ready for this, she said quietly. We thought you could handle it. We thought it was just part of this game. But this wasn't supposed to happen. I could hear the remorse in her voice, but it did nothing to ease the pain I felt. I had trusted them. I had trusted these girls, believing they were my friends, my support system. But now, I was left alone with the consequences of my action. They had all played a part in my downfall, even if they hadn't intended for it to happen this way. I could feel the anger rising inside of me, but more than anything, I felt empty, hollow, like I had lost everything. I had once dreamed of a bright future, of making my mother proud, of being someone who stood for something good. Now, I was just a broken girl, carrying a disease that would define the rest of my life. So I thought. The others sat there in silence, their faces contorted with shock and guilt, but none of them knew what to say. And in that moment, I realized that no one could save me, not even then. That night, I cried myself to sleep, unable to escape the nightmares that tormented me. I could still feel his hands on me, still hear his voice telling me that I was special, that I had made the right choice. But now, in the darkness of my room, those words seemed like lies. The power I had longed for had come with a terrible price, and I had lost everything in the process. I tried to reach out to my mother, but the shame was too much. I couldn't tell her what I had done, what I had allowed to happen. I had broken every promise I had made to her. Every lesson she had taught me about self worth and dignity, I had betrayed myself, and there was no way to take it back. In the days that followed, I distanced myself from the girls. I couldn't look at them the same way anymore. They had all played their part, but I couldn't blame them. I was the one who had made the choices. I was the one who had wanted to fit in so badly that I had sold myself to the highest bidder. Now, I had nothing left but the consequences of those choices. I spent the next few weeks in a daze trying to make sense of what had happened, but the answers were never clear. The sickness in my body grew worse, and I could feel the shame crushing me from the inside out. I had once been a girl with dreams, with hope for the future. Now, I was just another statistic. Another girl who had been chewed up and spit out by a world that didn't care about her. And I sat alone in my room. The weight of my mistakes finally sank in. It's too late, I thought. Too late for redemption. Too late to make things right. The girl who had once walked into the university with so much promise was now a shadow of her former self, and there was no going back. It wasn't just the HIV that had destroyed me, it was everything that had led up to it, the lies, the deceit, the choices I had made in the name of power and acceptance. I had thrown away my integrity, my dignity, my future, all for the illusion of being important. Now, all I had was regret, and there was no one to blame but myself. Days later, as though my choices hadn't cost me enough, I got a call from a strange number. It was someone from the village who knew my mother. She told me that weeks earlier my mom was very sick, and all effort to reach me was futile, and that my mother had passed. She told me my mother spent days in the hospital and that the doctor had diagnosed her with kidney failure. I didn't know what to do, if I should cry, run, or just end my life. I just lost the only person who loved me unconditionally, my mother. And what broke me the most is that she had been there all through my life when I needed her, and I wasn't there when she needed me the most. I couldn't even say my last goodbye to her on her sickbed. There and then, I knew my life had fallen apart. I don't know. Will it ever fall in place? Thank you for watching. We hope you were captivated by Ebere's journey, the lessons learned, the choices made, and the challenges faced. Life is never as simple as it seems, and sometimes the path to success is paved with tough decisions. But through it all, one thing remains true: it's never too late to change direction and stay true to who you are. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more, subscribe to our channel for future episodes. We have plenty more compelling stories, twists, and life lessons to share with you. Your support help us keep bringing these powerful tales to life. Don't forget to like, comment, and share with friends who would appreciate a story like Ebere's. We would love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share your reflections below. Stay connected, stay inspired, and always remember, the greatest stories are the ones that teach us something new about ourselves. Subscribe now and join the journey.